This is the Made for Success podcast, and this is Chris Widener, speaker and author of over 15 books, including the New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Angel Inside. The Made for Success podcast will help you turn your potential into performance, succeed in every area of your life, and achieve your dreams. And now, enjoy the show. Our guest today is Mike McGavick. Mike just stepped down as the chairman, president, and CEO of Safeco Corporation. Under his leadership, Safeco improved its financial performance, had record customer satisfaction, and improved performance of the core business lines. He has also served as the lead negotiator between the insurance industry and Congress and federal agencies as director of the Superfund Improvement Project for the American Insurance Association, ensuring that funds were properly used to clean up the nation's hazardous waste sites. Mike has also dedicated his time and energy to improve the educational opportunities of the children of Washington State, serving on the boards of the Alliance for Education, the Partnership for Early Learning, and the University of Washington Foundation. And in his spare time, he's campaigning for a 2006 United States Senate position. Welcome, Mike. Talking about different things that separate people into different classes or different groups, and they fire shells over the other side. Money. And you have lived a life where you've not had money, and you've lived a life where you've had quite a bit of money that most people would love to have. Why do you suppose money is something, and it's in politics too, you know, they're for the rich, they're for the poor, and they're the greedy, and they're the... Why does money do that? Because a lot of people who are watching our network, they want to make more money. They want to achieve in life. What is it about money that is both good and can be not so good? Why does money divide people, do you think?
Yeah, I've never understood it completely, but I've observed a couple of things. When you don't have much and aspire to have more, there can be a positive reaction to that, which is to motivate yourself to do more for others. Because no one, at least as I've watched, people don't make money just because. Right. They make money because they do something for someone else that other person is willing to pay a little more than it cost to do it, to reward the person for doing it, right? That's what the profit motivation is.
Sure.
And we see this in all aspects of society. People doing something for somebody else, getting paid a little bit more than it costs to do it. That's what a business is. And these notions are, I think, central to how we progress as a country, and how the free enterprise system has done so much for people, because it harnesses that profit motivation to get good things done for other people. Now, I think one of the reasons we get to this kind of division over money is sometimes if a person seeks to have more, they can take the view that of a jealousy, you know, that person doesn't deserve it, I should deserve it. Instead of focusing on it as a motivation, as a how can I serve others, because that's the path to having more financial freedom in my life. And I think if you focus on how do I create a path to serve others, rather than, boy, I wish I had that, you get an entirely different attitude. The other thing that I think about, though, is that, you know, people do get very upset about, you know, this person makes this much or this person makes that much. And I always find it strange, too. I was paid, as you might guess, very well to run Safeco. And because Safeco worked out, I got paid even more because the stock price rose. Sure. I'm very proud of what we achieved at Safeco, and I'm proud of the money I earned. At the same time, I admit, every once in a while you say, well, how come I'm paid so much? You know? Well, the short answer is the market sets how people are paid. Sure. But the larger question is, you know, at what point is it about the money and what point is it about service? And as long as it's always about service, the money just kind of takes care of itself. If you focus on the money, my experience is people who become centered on just money, they don't add a lot of value to society.
And people can use it as, you know, they view it cynically, or they use it as, you know, political capital in order to, well, you know, it's an easy way to set up a straw man and rip it back down.
Well, and they, you know, again, it's another way we divide each other rather than coming together. Yeah. And from my point of view, look, I don't have anything against rich, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I grew up in a true middle-class household. I mean, we didn't have a lot. My father was a civil servant when I was a young boy. I remember, you know, we got our clothes at rummage sales and stuff like that. But I never felt I wanted for anything because our family loved each other. And we played kick the can, and who cared? You know, it was just the way it was. And I've never really sought to make money. It's never been a motivation force in my life, ever. What's been a motivating force to my life is to use my skills as my father taught me to help others. And lo and behold, by doing that, I was well rewarded. But that never stuck out as a goal to me. It's kind of an odd byproduct.
Yeah. Has money changed you in any way? The ability to have more resources, either for good or for challenges maybe that you found in your life?
No, there's only a couple of things I can really focus on in that regard. One is, what opportunities am I going to provide my children? Because each of us is responsible to move our children forward, and I'm going to be able to, see that my children are well educated and those kinds of things, and that's going to be very important to fulfilling my obligation to them. So I'm proud of that.
Sure.
And outside of that, the only other thing is some of the charitable work that Galen and I have been able to get involved in. Education's been a particular passion to us, and so we've been involved in trying to help get early childhood learning programs going in this state. We've been involved in trying to get the University of Washington to be more diverse in its population of students. We've been involved in trying to create greater access. So these are things that really matter to us, because education is the one place where this society sometimes doesn't give a fair chance.
What do you mean by that?
We have pockets in this country of really what I would call systemic poverty. In other words, the lack of opportunity being passed from mother to son and daughter, and it just goes like this. And we saw it in New Orleans when Katrina blew through.
Sure.
Now, look, sure, if people get focused, they can fight through a lot of obstacles. But it seems to me that every child, if we believe in public education, if we believe in making this difference, every child should be able to show up at school able to learn. And we now know through research going on over at the University of Washington that we're losing learning skills in ages 0 to 3. Because proper parenting skills are the basics of kind of igniting the learning process. So we're creating some programs that go in and help families that perhaps haven't seen great parenting skills in their own experience learn skills that will help ignite that learning process in that child and prepare them to learn. Those are some things we can do to help everyone have a great shot. After that, it's up to the conduct you embody and your character and your merit and hard work. But getting that equal start is very, very important.
Yeah. We're going to come back to education in a little bit. I want to kind of pursue this angle a little bit more about charity. It's another thing I found about successful people is they tend to want to give back. And it sounds to me like what you're saying is that wealth has allowed me the freedom to really give back to causes and concerns that I care about.
Well, it has, and there's no question that involvement is a wonderfully gratifying part of my life. At the same time, this Senate race is not exactly about making more money.
Right, exactly. You're taking a pay cut.
Because the way in which pay is really structured in corporations, there was a whole lot of money on the table, some unbelievable amount of money that Galen and I kind of looked at and said, you know what, we're going to go do this other thing because the service is more important to us. Now, it doesn't mean we're threatened to have bread on our table. We've done very well. Right. We're very blessed. But at the same time, a person who's focused on the wrong things, they would never have left that pot of money behind. But it isn't about that in the end. It's not whose coffin is going to be more full of gold coin. Yeah. It's about who's going to make the greater difference, who's going to leave behind a trail that says they were worth having on this earth. That's what's worth struggling for.
Yeah. You've mentioned your wife a couple times. Sounds like she's a great partner. Can you tell us a little bit about your life, where you met her, and how long you've been married, and the kids that you have?
Sure. Galen and I have been married 11 years. We met in Washington, D.C. I was working on reforming the nation's Superfund laws, hazardous space cleanup laws, so that we could clean up more and pay lawyers less. Seems like a good goal. And Galen at the same time was working for the American Hospital Association. She's a lawyer. And she was there working through remember the Clinton healthcare plan proposals in the early 90s? She was working on behalf of the hospital community to really understand the effects and ways to make that work or not work as they saw fit. And so she's deeply steeped in public policy. This idea that we give back through public service has very much been a part of her life and a part of our life together. We have 2 sons together. We have Gates, who is 9 years old, and Marco, who's 7. I was married once before. I have a failed marriage. My son, though, from that marriage is a wonderful part of our life, Jack McGavick. He's now 17. He just got accepted to college. He's off and roaring in his life.
So it's a good thing he made some money, because now college, that costs of college.
Well, that and his driver's license are very expensive events in anybody's life. Right. But, we are, we are really blessed. These kids are great kids, and we're very proud of them. But, they factored deeply in Galen and my conversation about this, because believe me, a fair amount of people have said to me, you have this great job, you know, you have this cushy life. Why are you going to do this? And one of my tallest friends, he looks at me and says, well, I can finally see that hole in your head, you know. And but we looked at it. And we were in a position in our lives where I had developed the experience, practical experience, that I could really contribute. Our nation isn't doing very well. That was really bothering us. And then we looked at our kids and we said, boy, this can't be good for them. You know, it's going to be nasty, it's intense, you're away a lot. Maybe we really shouldn't do it. But our conclusion was, you know, we can't tell our children that it's about service and be unwilling to serve ourselves. Yeah. You cannot tell children, you know, it's about sacrificing for the next generation if you'll make no sacrifice. So we had to look ourselves in the mirror and say, yeah, this has been a very nice life, and yeah, that pile of money would be nice, but you know what? It's more important to be able to look our children in the eye and say, we did everything we could to give you a life as good or better than the one we inherited. And not just you two, but all your friends and every person you'll ever meet. Our job is that next generation, and that was it. We decided we were running.
Speaking about the importance of family, how do you run a very large corporation and still take care of home? I mean, what are some tips for that? Because, you know, most people who are watching this probably less busy than you, but still very busy. And it seems to be a common thing. How do I juggle all this stuff? I love my family, I want to see my kids grow up, and yet I know that I want to do this and I'm rewarded well for it. How do you do that? How did you find the ability to balance those two very important things in your life?
Well, you just cannot let go of one for the other. There are some sacrifices worth making, there are some not. And one sacrifice you just can't make is to the quality of life or experience that your children have of you. And that doesn't mean that you have to be there all the time. In fact, that would hurt children too. The key is, what is the quality of their experience of you? Do they understand that not only you care, but you go extra effort to make sure that they are growing and learning and behaving and all the things that parents provide their children? And it's not the number of hours in the day you're with them, it's the quality and the focus of that experience. Now, in my situation, I've been very lucky. Galen's not working, hasn't worked since our first child was born, which is a great sacrifice on her part because she's a great lawyer. And you know, it's so amazing to me how people do this. I'm sure you've seen it. People will go up and they'll say, well, what do you do? I work at insurance. And they'll turn to my wife, well, what do you do? And she'll say, well, I'm at home. Oh, well, no, they'll go talk to somebody else right away. What Galen's doing is so important. And it's so hard.
Exactly.
And you know, they devalue this. It's so strange to me.
Do you work? No, I just stay at home. Well, that's
she works her tail off, number one. And number two, she's doing important work. Number three, she's a lawyer, for Pete's sake. You can learn a lot about healthcare policy by talking to my wife. But people get this, you know, it's so
Again, it's another way of categorizing people, and it's interesting why we do that.
We all need to be in it. But you know, we've been very lucky that she could do that. You know, I mean, there's families out there, as we all know, that are struggling with single-parent households where there's not a lot of flexibility. And so, yeah, you're going to have to make enough to put food on the table and keep things moving. That's part of a human experience. But you still have to make that time. And I've just seen so many people always find a way to make that time. That I just don't have much. I don't accept excuses that well, I was just too busy. No, you can make it work. It's up to you focusing and organizing yourself to keep priorities, and you got to keep your children way up top.
What does your family do for fun?
Just about it. These days we're trying to break in a new little puppy, so our house is just torn apart right now. So we're focused on that. It's been great though, because it gets the kids doing something that's about something other than what they think is fun. So they have to help work and do chores and take care of the puppy, and that's been great for the family. But we like to do all kinds of things, whether it's go to a movie or sports or just hang out, play catch. It's all boys, so it's pretty rough and tough. We have a good time, and we have a blast together. They're beautiful children.
You've talked about lessons that you want to instill in your children, and I think that that's every parent's main goal is, you know, how do I make my kid's life better? I've heard a story, but I'd like you to tell it a little bit about a lesson that you learned as a kid, and it has to do with a skateboard mishap.
Boy, good research. I
called all your friends, Mike. I know everything.
I was about 8 or something like that, and you know, I was over in Wallingford. We lived on Bagley Street in Wallingford, and not a very steep street, but a little bit of grade. And you know, the skateboards back then, you had those clay wheels, not this fancy. They were really, you know, nothing. They were just about roller skates nailed to boards, just a little better than that. And I was riding on one of these things, and I'm screwing around, and I fall off, and that thing, you would have thought it was a heat-seeking missile. It just shoots, and it goes straight through the neighbor's basement window. I mean, it could have gone anywhere, but no, you know, and kablooey, and I'm on the ground, you know, my knees are cut up like always. So I go crying home, you know. I mean, Mom will take care of this somehow.
You didn't go to the neighbor first?
No, that's,
okay.
you know,
this is part of the story.
I wish, I wish. So I show up home, and I'm thinking, well, Mom will make it all better, of course. And my mother,
how old were you?
I was 8 or 7.
8 or 9, okay.
And she spins me around. She says, you will not come back to this house until you, I mean, she didn't even look at my knee, you know. I was very upset. She said, you will not come into this house until you go over there and you knock on the door and you tell them what happened and you tell them you will mow their lawn until it's paid for. Now, I don't want to hear it, and well, this isn't the deal I thought was going to, and you know, it was all about personal responsibility. And by the way, every time I've ever thought of that or described it to somebody, they will say it to me. Yeah, I remember a similar story where my parents got through to me finally that you just raised your hand and said, yes, I did, and I'm sorry. And, you know, sure enough, they thought it was an act of courage for me to go over there. I wish I'd have gone there first. I've learned that that's how you do it. Yeah. But I tell you, that, that kind of life lesson that we teach our children is so important to our role as parents. And it becomes how our culture functions, how we each know what to do when no one's there to tell us what to do. You know, the next time anything like that happened, I didn't need my mom to know what to do. I had learned it, and we teach each other. And, you know, I can think of so many things in our society where that simple lesson of personal accountability, of personal responsibility. I didn't sue the skateboard manufacturer. I didn't sue the city because the sidewalk wasn't even. I didn't sue my neighbor because their window was in the wrong place. Right. You know, which is probably what would happen today.
What would happen now?
No, we don't do that. We take accountability and we deal with our own problem.
What about a lesson your grandpa taught you when he handed you a tool belt?
Well,
Tell us about that.
You know, my grandpa, he was a hard. In fact, my grandpa and grandma were both very hard-working people. Union family. She was in the paper workers up at Scott Paper Mill up in Everett, and he was a union carpenter. And you know, he'd work when there was work, and wouldn't work when there was work, and he'd be building stuff all the time. It was really fascinating because my grandma would work the night shift, grandpa would work in the days, and they did it all because they wanted to have a farm. She had dreamed of being a farmer, and they had this tiny little postage stamp piece of ground up in Snohomish that they farmed. And so here she'd work all night at the paper mill. She'd come home, and if it was a weekend when the kids were out there, she'd run us ragged working the farm. I don't know when she ever, I swear I don't know when she slept. Well, the story you're asking about, Grandpa, you know, he was a gruff old guy, and, you know, Norwegian guy, Harkinson, you know, they didn't, you know, talk to kids and stuff. Kids were out of the way. Well, we all loved him. You know how if a person pushes you away, sometimes you just want to be closer all the time?
Right, yeah.
I'd follow him around while he was doing his work. He'd build buildings there on the farm. And I'd just follow him around, and I'd just have to keep a respectful distance, you know. And so I never really had any feeling that he liked me. I just had a feeling I was following him around. Well, later in high school, one of the jobs I had in the summers to help pay for high school, because I went to public school until high school, and I went to Seattle Prep for that part of my education, and I had to help pay for it. So I'd work in the summers, and you know, Dad would take on the money. And one of the last jobs I got was as a union carpenter, an apprentice. You know, just in the union there to help carry stuff for the real carpenters.
Do you ever get your union card?
No, I got the apprentice card, but I never stayed with it.
Gotcha.
I just did it in the summers.
Yep.
But I'll never forget, my grandfather heard I got that card, you know, and he never drove down to Seattle.
Right.
And sure enough, there's a knock at the door, and he's standing in the doorway. And he says, well, I heard you got your apprentice card. And I said, I did. And he said, do you know how to drive a nail? And I said, well, I think I know. I pounded plenty of nails in my life. He says, do you know how to drive a nail? And I said, well, I don't know, Grandpa. And we went out, and there was this old board, and we drove nails until he thought I had it right. And then he's getting ready to leave, and he turns around, and he holds out his tool belt. And he says, here, I want you to have this. And I said, thank you. And he said, you know, he says, I want you to work hard so you don't need to use it all your life. And then he drove away. I mean, you know, you spend all that time wondering if he's even knows you're around.
Yeah. And
then and it was, to me, it's such a powerful experience. both because he cared so much and that meant a lot to me as a person, but also because, you know, he understood in his own way that same idea. You're trying to enable the next generation to be better. You're not, that's a proud thing to do. And you know, people have said to me, well, your poor grandpa, he worked so hard in his life and now you're some fat cat CEO. And I said, you know what, my grandpa would be so proud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's why he did it. It's
why
we all do it.
That's why it just keeps going. That is the fundamental gift that keeps giving.
Let's talk politics a little bit. I have quite a bit of interest in politics, and some people say, well, you should never talk about politics or religion or sex or, you know, whatever. Right. We'll skip religion and sex and we'll just stick to politics because it's important. It affects our everyday life in profound ways. And so there really are discussions that we have to have. So let me ask you this. Why are you running for the United States Senate? I mean, why Mike McGavick?
You know, my life has developed in a peculiar way that I would never have expected. You know, when I was involved in politics as a young man, running campaigns and being a chief of staff in the United States Senate, I mean, I was doing that at 30 years old. You know, so I'd been around big-time politics, and I understood how it worked and how much good can be done through that work. But I also got so discouraged with the way politics in the mid-90s, which is when I left the Senate, had become so mean-spirited. It was all about divide, never solve problems. And I just said, you know, I don't have time for this. Life's too short. This is not what it's supposed to be about. And so I decided, hey, I'm a Republican. I believe in free enterprise. I'm going to go prove I can earn an honest living. I'm going to go out in the marketplace and wound up in insurance, and good things happened over time. But that one part of my life had prepared me to make a difference, to understand how you really got things done in the United States Senate. Meanwhile, went out in the free enterprise system and found out just how hard it is to create jobs and to build companies and do all these things. And those things went very well. I helped start a small company that's still going today. I wound up running a Fortune 500 company that was about to fail. We turned it around. But I learned a lot from those experiences about leadership, about how groups of people depend upon one another, how to bring people together to solve problems. I just learned a lot. And all of a sudden, it was like all that stuff that I worked on as a young man around the political world began to have a whole new relevance again. It was clear that somehow I had prepared myself to really make a difference for others. And you know, the Safeco turnaround happened faster than we ever thought. And the next thing I knew, I said, well, I've done what I came here to do. You know, that was what I was hired to do, was to make that company successful. We lost $1 billion my first year. We had record earnings my fourth year. The company is booming. You know, it's just a great place to work again. And I said, I've done this. But now I'm at a place where my nation's going the wrong way, my state's going the wrong way. It just feels like we're skeetering sideways. I could do something about that, and I actually have practical knowledge to apply. I learned that world. I know how to do it. To be blessed to have success in both worlds, I think, makes a very unique opportunity to serve others. And as I've told you earlier, so Gillian and I looked at each other and said, we are going to show our kids what sacrifice and service is all about.
And it really is sacrifice running. I've had a number of friends who've run for political office, and I can remember sitting there at 9 o'clock at night. My wife and I'd be there, and we'd say, well, you know, Dino Rossi, who ran for governor, and I'd say, well, I don't know where Dino is, but I know where he isn't, because I knew that running for an office is a sacrifice. It's not all glory and, you know, all that stuff. It's a lot of chicken dinners and bad breakfasts at the, you know, all the different clubs. It really takes a lot, and it is a sacrifice. So you've got a haul ahead of you. Coming from Safeco, where you're running a business and you say, okay, we're bringing in X amount of dollars and we have to spend less than X. X minus Y equals the profit. You're going into a place where it seems like money grows on trees. And whether it's Democrats or Republicans, it seems like the last 20 years has just been increasing budgets, increasing deficits, and it seems like we're selling our future out and we're selling our children out. How do you apply the principles of commerce, which is spend less than you earn, to a place that thinks they just print more money?
Well, it's not just the principles of commerce, it's the principles of your family as well. You know, you have so much, and from what you're earning, you have to live off it. And you hope you can set a little aside, whether it's for the kids to go to college or for retirement or for whatever it is you dream of. Well, if you think about constructing a budget that way, which most families do right across the kitchen table, we sure do it at our family, you know, it just isn't right to see the federal government run amok, and it really has. I'm very discouraged. I mean, if I think about the big issues that confront us, it's my number two. My number one is this war. I mean, anytime your children are overseas fighting for you, it's got to be first, front and center.
Sure.
But number two is this deficit. These are relatively good economic times. I mean, the economy's not booming like it was in the 90s, but it's more real, and the growth's pretty steady. That's pretty attractive. And yet, here's our federal government just spending more and more and more. It makes no sense. And the trick is, you know, when companies get in trouble, and at Safeco, for example, we had more money going out the door than we had coming in. Well, we had to take drastic action. Yeah. I led decisions that just kept me up for weeks and weeks and weeks, but you ultimately have to do the right thing for the good of the whole, right? So at our company, for example, we let 1,200 people go. Awful. I mean, I hope I never, ever get to participate in something like that again.
Sure.
But it was the right thing to do. And from those days, we were able to see Safeco come back to glory. We saved 10,000 jobs by being willing to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And I look at our country and we seem unwilling to make difficult decisions for the good of the whole. You know, think about this. Do you realize that the rate of growth in population and the rate of growth in federal employees is about the same? Now, tell me a company you'd buy stock in where that was true.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Where the number of customers was growing and the number of employees was growing at the same rate. What we expect to see is customers grow and productivity to enable us to do more with less.
Sure.
But only at government do we not see that. So when people say, oh, you got to raise taxes to fix the deficit, I say, no, we don't. We have to keep our foot on the supply of money because they'll already spend more than you give them. And then we have to use that pressure to redefine how we deliver what government delivers so that government can deliver more for less, just like business delivers more for less. Look, I don't think you ought to say, you know, I've heard the old expression, you know, well, I want to run government like a business. Look, government is not a business. Mm-hmm. It has very different goals and purposes in our lives. Having said that, there are certain things we learn in the corporate sector about how to make things work and how to make it more efficient that we have to apply to the federal government.
Let me ask you this. Is it possible? There's people who are fatalistic. They say, those politicians, they're just going to get more of our money and spend it. And, you know, there is a fatalistic sense amongst a lot of people that says, Washington, D.C., they're just going to take more of our money, you know, on both sides, Democrat and Republican. People feel like they're just going to keep spending money and we're out of control and we're all doomed.
Well, I am frustrated with both parties. Let's start there. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm frustrated with the whole crowd,
Yeah.
not Republicans, not Democrats. I'm frustrated with the whole crowd. Am I optimistic, though? Absolutely. Look, this country has been in worse spots than this. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. For us to say, oh, America's threatened, democracy's not going to be on the march, capitalism's, oh, nonsense. I mean, we got through the Civil War. It ain't going to get any worse than that. Mm-hmm. We came together after World War I. We came together out of a depression that was of unbelievable magnitude across the globe. We came out of World War II, helped rebuild Europe while creating the greatest economy known to man here at home. We got past all the depression that followed Vietnam and the Iran hostage crisis and all of the inflation that went on in the 70s and came through it at the close of the century as the most powerful and prosperous nation on earth. We are a people you cannot hold down because our principles are right. Our principles of freedom, our principles of willing to defend freedom, the free enterprise system, capitalism, these are the most powerful ways to organize humans that mankind has ever discovered.
But it seems like government works against all the stuff that the average American's trying to do because of the money in politics. You get elected, and then as soon as you get elected, the very first thing you do is you start working to get reelected. And the way you get reelected is you get a bunch of people to give you money. And the only reason they're giving you money is because you're telling them, you know, we're going to do our best to support you and work for you. And you get sort of this Faustian bargain between people. How does that change?
Well, first, I'm less cynical than you are about why people give money to politics, because I've given money to politics over the years, and I've had people give to me, and I can tell you many of them are simply inspired to make a change. So first, I'm a little less cynical about it. Sure, there are lobbyists and people like that giving money because they want access or something like that. But you, as a public office holder, you have to have an absolute obligation that your core job is to serve the people that sent you, regardless of who gave you money along the way to fund the race. It's just, you have to have that as a foremost principle in your mind. And I'd observe this for you. If you look at the Senate right now, who are the people Americans admire most? Certainly that I admire most. They're not the people who vote 90% with their party, as though they can't solve a problem. They just have to speak the party line. They're not the people who just kind of hunker down with, I'm on business's side or I'm on labor's side, and they never listen to anybody else. They're the people like the John McCains, the Joe Liebermans, who are just completely apart because they are representing their states and their views always.
Yeah.
And they still are very successful at raising money and doing the other things because people sense in them a decency and a fundamental. They punch through the peer pressure, they punch through all that junk. That's the job of someone who runs for the United States Senate. That's what I'll do. That's the only way I would know how to approach it.
Mm. So let's just give a little synopsis here. Whether you're in business, you're in politics, you're a stay-at-home mom, what would you say is the key to a successful life? What makes a successful life?
I think it's always having purpose that goes beyond your self-satisfaction. It's always having goals, whether for your family or your community, your church, whatever you're concerned about, that draws you and those around you forward, and that you must view what you're working on as being in service of the success of the group. If you approach life that way, it's amazing how often people will ask you to lead more, because they can see the benefit that that each individual gets from your role among the group.
Excellent. It's been fun getting a chance to meet you. Thanks for listening to the Made for Success podcast. Get to know us at madeforsuccess.com/podcast. Meet the hosts of the Made for Success podcast and pick up a free copy of the Totally Motivated ebook by Chris Widener. We will see you next time on the Made for Success podcast.